it is a bit of an art, an art form, and I think people are recognising this over the years now. When they look back, they think, well, crikey, it is creating something out of sand in a way.
If it's a manifold, if you look at your car again, your exhaust manifold, that is a casting.
If you go, for example, on to the seaside and the sand's wet and you put your foot in the sand, it leaves a negative impression of your foot. Now, if you can imagine that is a mould and you had some metal and you poured it into that mould and then you let it set and you pull it out, you'd have a perfect impression of your foot. So casting, in a nutshell, is that, but obviously there are more complex details of the type of sand and metal and everything.
Working in a foundry is a dirty job.
It's not the cleanest occupation, I must admit.
It was dirty, but it washes off now, so no problem. I mean, everybody got dirty, but nobody took no notice. I mean, I've been times I've been covered in oil, dirt, sand, but no, I enjoyed it. It washed off.
In a foundry, there's dust and dirt and fumes and grit, and you do gradually, as the day goes by, from sort of 7:30 in the morning till you go at 5 o'clock, and you look a different bloke and you come out to the foundry,
I'll be sweating, there's sand in the face, in the nose. I've seen them in the showers later. You'd think they got mascara on because you'd see all the sand literally running out of the eyes. They've got that from the dust.
In the latter days we got sophisticated. We had showers, but in the early days you just went out. You'd come out and hope your missus would recognise you,
I've had showers at work and come back here and have another shower and the bath's still full of sand after. That's what used to get everywhere, bits of iron filings.
In the latter days they used to have safety goggles, so you get a big ridge around your eyes then, but because in the 40s and 50s you're a sissy if you wore safety goggles,
But the atmosphere in a foundry is nothing like any other factory I've ever worked in. Couldn't believe it. Fantastic places to work really.
They always used to keep the shovels perfectly clean, and of course when it was breakfast time they'd put their eggs on the shovels and they'd fry their eggs on it,
They worked hard and played hard, basically, and you could have a good laugh and still do your job at the same time.
And also, when they poured metal into a mould and there's molten metal lying on the top, they put the kettle on and they'd boil the kettle for the tea, on the top of the mould, which is just everybody did it, Funny how well.
Well, it's just the guys that work in the mould working.
When we did bigger castings, there was more teamwork because one bloke would be putting the weights on the mould, the others there'd be a couple of them getting the metal because there's more metal in a bigger pot, and they'd be sort of more teamwork there. And in the latter days, when we started getting moulding machines and conveyors, there'd be more teamwork still then, because there'd be some making the moulds, some doing the pouring, some doing the knocking out.
If ever there was water, it rained and we got leaks in the roof and there was pots of bits of water or something on the floor and molten metal went in that, well, it went off like a bomb. And especially when late afternoon when they finished work, they'd be dropping the bottom. If there was too much water from the night before, it'd explode, and we've had all the windows blow out of all the offices.
The temperatures were about 1500 degrees centigrade for molten iron. It was a rough guide, which was pretty hot. I can remember a bloke pouring some down his foot, years ago, and I had to take him to the hospital. He burnt half his foot away, and I can remember the burning smells in the cars. I was driving to the hospital and I said, "Are you all right, Jack?" He said, "Oh, it's a bit warm." So that's typical of the blokes that worked in the foundry.
It's just the way of life.
In the early days, you didn't have, sophisticated wet arresters for the fumes, and the fumes used to belch out of the top of the furnace, and we used to get complaints from the residents because the tops of the cars were like sandpaper, and they used to say, "You ever ruined our car?" And we used to say, obviously, because we were a smaller family, "Oh, it must be Clancy's or Henley's around the corner."
The smells like in the foundry, a lot of it would probably come from the cores because it smelled like fish, the resins they use.
In the 40s and 50s, when we were doing unmechanised castings, it was a different sort of smell than later on, because later on we were doing this resin bonded sand stuff, and that had got more of a sort of toxic smell, which wasn't quite so pleasant.
There was shell, what they call it, a shell sand, which give off yet another type of smell.
You go in the foundry and you get the fumes in your suit, where you're all smart to go and see a good customer. It stinks like the clappers. We used to make castings in grey iron. In the early days, it was just iron. We didn't know anything. Half bricks, dead cats went into it, into the mix.
Clancy's manufactured camshafts. As a foundry, we manufactured camshafts which were machined by the actual customer. That's the likes of Porsche, BMW, Mercedes-Benz. But we manufactured cast iron tappets, which were machined by ourselves, which went out as a finished product to the likes of Ford and Perkins in quantities of up to 200,000 a week.
From the mid-60s onwards, we started going into making castings for pumps and valves, compressors, and also wood-burning stoves became very popular in the 70s.
A lot of manifolds for Perkins diesel engines. There's parts for Jaguar.
For Aston Martin, we did a little aluminium pump casting that went in under the bonnet. That was of the V8 models that were made in the 70s. This is when Aston Martin were making 6 cars a week.
They used to do a lot of parts for looms up north, for the big looms in the weaving industry. Lots of them used to be done. We lost the contract on that once. They sent it abroad. Within, I think it was about 4 to 6 months, we had it all back because nobody could make it. Only us could make that. Because the castings used to bend, and we was the only ones who could cast them and get them flat.
We used to make all the runners in cast iron in a cooker. I mean, they're all pressed metal today, but where you sort of stick your frying pan in, there were metal cast iron runners up the side. We did stacks of those, and then there were gas burners,
brake drums for lorries, gearbox housings, parts for tractors, weights.
Customers would have our castings. They would then machine them and fit them onto a big massive generator or pump or something like that.
The Queen's Award for Industry for manufacturing a core which actually took the weight out of the centre of the camshaft castings, and it was a specialised process which we managed to keep very secret for a number of years.
Everybody knew the job and everybody knew how dangerous it was, but safety did change because that's the law of today.
I mean, even in the paper the other week, there's a foundry making aluminium die castings in the Stourbridge area. They've been driven out because all the people complain about the fumes and the dust because they don't want it. People aren't used to it today, so you got no chance.
What have we lost? We've lost a good industry, I think, in foundries.
The camaraderie and the warmth and the wonderful feeling between the people then was, it's hard to explain. Looking back a year or two later, I thought, well, when I went into the foundry trade in the late 50s, there were above 2,000 foundries operating, making grey iron in the country. When we closed, there were about 100 left in the country. So I thought, well, if we went into a cross-country race with 2,000 people, come on, who would miss that? So I suppose, in a way, you can reconcile it with that. It wasn't just us, it's just something you couldn't stop. It was the flood of stuff coming from abroad, and also the incredibly growing health and safety restrictions that have come in that prevent people in this country making stuff now.
It's only common sense, really, health and safety. I mean, it's got its good points, it's got its bad points, but I think a lot of it now, today, is over the top.
We've lost skills because the new generation coming up don't know anything about it. So it's if you transmit it all back into the sort of World War periods and things like that, we wouldn't have a chance today because there's nobody to make anything these days.
There's just something about foundries I loved, I really did. And if I had the opportunity to go back into one tomorrow, I would.